Hello, this is Brad Wild, and today we are starting a flight from Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is the Gerald Ford Airport. It is Kilo Golf Romeo Romeo. And sitting before you is the ZIBO Mod 737-800. Again, this is a package that wraps around the Laminar Research Default 737 that comes with X-Plane. We're going to take a short flight down to Chicago Midway just to exercise some of the capabilities of the ZIBO and to get into a little bit more detail in the setup of this aircraft. Yes, I'm trying to rival my friend Steve Haynes, who also has some very detailed videos on YouTube, so be sure to check those out. So let's get started. Those of you who have flown with me before know that I'm a big fan of Flight Aware because I like to see what real airlines are doing. And I found a flight from Grand Rapids to Chicago, and it's on a Southwest flight. It's a little under 50 minutes, 50. And notice the route is straight south, then to the west, and not a straight line to the southwest. This is probably to avoid traffic that's flying into O'Hare. Taking a look at the route, I'm decoding it, and you can see I pulled it up over here. I did a screenshot, and I'm just interested to have all of these fixes in front of me when I'm programming the FMC. So to fuel the airplane, I'm going to use the X-Plane administration panel. Underneath the ZIBO wrap, it is the default Boeing 737 that comes with X-Plane, so we have to use the X-Plane dialog to fuel it up. This is a little bit unlike something like the JAR A320 where you are using a proprietary dialog to fuel that airplane, and the Laminar dialog has no effect. But that's another story. So I'm going to eliminate the fuel for the center tank, and we need about an hour and 40 minutes or so. I'm adding about 45 minutes to our flight and including a little bit for taxi. Payload in this airplane maxes out at 20,000 kilograms, so let's say we're about 3/4 full today. We need to be below 63,000 to land. Also note, I've got metric versus pounds. I have found that a lot of online tools do use the kilograms, so just easier, saves a little bit of conversion time. So that covers fueling the airplane. We'll deal with the center of gravity shortly. So what would flight planning be without a trip to skyvector.com? I've plugged our route into the flight plan dialog, and it's plotted a route very similar to what we saw in the actual flight path that the airplane took in Flight Aware. So we're in good company. Take a look at what Gerald Ford has to offer in terms of SIDS, and there are none. So we fly directly to a VOR AZO. Now, Midway, that's a different story. Let's see what the winds are. They are 140 at 7 knots. So take a look at the airport diagram. And we've got, looks like we would be coming from the northwest and landing to the south. Let's take a look at the star going into Midway. It's Pang 3, if you recall. We'll flip it around here. Bagel is our, remember this over here? Bagel is our transition, I guess you would call it, and we fly that west, and we'll have to plug all this into the FMC to see how it routes us around from the northwest as we land to the southeast. All right, last stop on our little journey through flight planning. I know it's a little bit like running errands with your mother. Remember those days? Anyway, we are at simbrief.com, and I've plugged in the information and a new flight plan, and you can see that I've got departure and arrival airports. I put in an altitude of 20,000, and it's showing me departure runway of 26 left, arrival 13 center, or 13 center I should say. And the route suggested is what we have planned on. And moving on down, you can see that it has been plotted exactly as we saw when we plotted it in SkyVector. So no surprises there. So let's generate our official flight plan. Okay, let's see what the results are. I'm a little curious what it predicted for fuel, and it's telling me just under 6,000, and I was just over 6,000. Again, the route is exactly as we had planned, and plotted it's exactly the same. And now let's take a look at our flight plan. So probably one of the most important pieces of information that SimBrief gives us is our load sheet. And I'm interested in this column here. So it's giving us a cost index of 74, which is a little bit higher than I normally use. So it's going to burn a little bit more fuel, but we're going to get greater, faster performance. And it might be because it's such a short flight. And this is just distances. Here's our average wind, which I will plug into the FMC. So 271 and 206. I'm sorry, 026. I'm going to write that down. And then, so the next number I'm interested in is the ISA, and this is a deviation from the standard temperature at cruise. So it's saying we're going to be 8 degrees warmer. This does have implications in fuel burn and so on, but this gets plugged into our FMC. Finally, in the airplane. So let's begin where all flights begin. Turn on our battery and cover that up. And I'm going to place this on battery. These switches don't really do anything, but I'm going to go with ground power as well. In previous versions you had to flip these on, but I was just listening to Mentor Pilot and he says these are always on anyway. And this is on standby power auto. So we'll just leave that. And now that we have some ground power, we can go ahead and turn on some air conditioning. We'll eventually have to flip those off, but people need a little air in the back. And we'll turn on our logo light. We'll leave this on steady. And now let's drop down to our FMC and make a couple of adjustments that a real pilot wouldn't have to make. The ZIBO mod gives you a couple of options that you can set. Before we do fuel and center of gravity, let's go to other configuration, and I'm going to start with realism. This is the align time of the IRS. Normally it's about, I don't know, 10-15 minutes. but I'm going to make it short, which is about a minute. And then I don't really get the tire blown business, but I turn it off. Back to that second menu, and we have configuration. I want to set global units to kilograms. That will come in handy when we start talking about center of gravity. And finally, under hardware, I want my nose wheel axis to be on yaw. At least that's the last one that worked for me. I've also used roll, but they've changed something in the most recent version. There used to just be a switch on the panel where you would flip it on to get your nose wheel steering, but now you have to go through the MCDU to do that. Now to the fuel and center of gravity screen. All of these figures are derived directly from the X-plane Now to the fuel and center of gravity screen. All of these figures here are derived directly from the X-plane dialog where we entered our fuel and payload. The only mystery down here is the zero weight center of gravity and center of gravity. I've been told by reliable sources, a pilot, that this is supposed to be 18. I don't know why. If somebody has an explanation about all of this, you can please leave a comment. But my friend Steve Haynes tells me that 23 is the magic number here, and that will give us 18%. So I'm just going to leave it like that. So let's align our IRS, and again we're going to go the short route, which is about a minute. So I set that to heading status and then flip this to align, and then when this turns white I turn this to nav, and you can see we have 1 minute. Otherwise it could be a lot longer. So back to our MCDU, and let's just take a look at this first screen. Note that my nav data is up to date. I'm using Navigraph data, which is a paid subscription, but it wants the IRS position in a second. So let's put in our reference airport, which is origin. And then we want to pick up our position here by going to the second screen, so next page, and that copies it to the scratch pad, previous page, and enter it there. And now we're set. So let's go over to our route now, and notice that it's placed this the airport, Grand Rapids, in the scratch pad, so go ahead and enter that, and then we're going to Midway. Be somewhat official here. I think it was 1000 in SimBrief. I've never heard of one like that, but hey, it took it. So let's go to our departure and arrival. So we are departing from Grand Rapids. So now it's time to get that route plugged in. So we go to next page, and you can see that we've got an opportunity here to put in our first waypoint. By the way, there's a difference between a waypoint and a fix. A fix could be anything. It could be a stadium that you fly over on the ground. But a waypoint is an official point that can be measured by latitude and longitude. But I suppose a stadium could be too, right? Anyway, when entering waypoints, they go on the right. So direct to Alpha Zulu Oscar, And I'll activate that. And now let's go over to our departure. And we're runway 08. I checked the weather and it has changed. Winds are now out of the east. And for our arrival, we're going to be landing ILS 13C and Pang 3 and Bagel for transition. And now let's take a look at our legs. So we've got a discontinuity here, so we'll put that in our scratch pad, Bagel, and then enter it there, and then continuing on down. So we've got vectors that take us up to HebQ, but let's just get rid of that and see what it does. Put HebQ in the scratch pad, then fill in the blanks, and now let's take a look at this on our map using the plan view. Sorry about that. And let's step through it. So there is our VOR, then Bagel, Pang, and then up to HebQ and our approach into runway 130. Put that back on the map. And now let's do our init ref. So let's put in our, this is just a matter of just clicking. And remember our reserves, I believe it was 2.0. Believe is not a good word to use in aviation, is it? And this was 74. So we will go like crazy. And then our flight level 200. And our winds were 271. At 026, and our ISA number was 08, or I'll just put 8 here, and it fills out our top of climb. Our transition stays the same, so it's over to N1. Probably should have done this earlier, but let's listen to ATIS.
Gerald R. Ford Intel Information Romeo. 2200 Zulu weather. Wind light and variable, visibility more than 10. Sky conditions 5,000 few, 9,500 scattered, 20,000 broken, temperature 24, dew point 14. Altimeter 3008. Arriving runways 26 left, 26 right. Departing runways 26 left, 26 right. Advise on initial contact. You have Romeo.
So that changes a few things, but let's start by getting in our temperature 24. We can make this D rate 45, and you can see that we're at 94%. Let's go with, so now we're down to 90. And our flaps will be 5. Notice our center of gravity is 18.8. Our trim, 5.5. And we want to select our V speeds, noting 144 as our V2. And our runway is, I'm going to stick with 8. It's light and variable, but I think that should work. Let's just check our trim. and we'll just roll it down to 5.5. So we should be set there. So that covers the programming of our FMC via the CDU or the MCDU, and now we can continue with our preflight. So back up to our overhead panel, and we'll just start on the left here and just move down each column and make sure everything is set. So we'll start with our yaw damper on here and continue down to our fuel pumps. Remember, we have no fuel in our center tank. These are all set properly. We have not turned on our APU yet, and we can do so shortly. And we can put on our panel lights, and let's arm our emergency lights, and smoking should be on. I don't even know why they bother to put that switch there. Are there places where you can smoke? I suppose auto would be fine, but... And these need a while apparently, so we'll turn these on and come back to these later. And turn on our electrical pumps. And trim air on. We will leave these where they are for now. Our flight altitude is 20,000. In Chicago is about 700. And we'll leave these where they are. So now we're ready for our APU. So we'll just go ahead and start that. And you'll see this EG needle come up. And then it falls back down. And while we're waiting, let's go down to our, turn off our master caution. And moving across, we do not need to worry about our course, but we do need to arm our auto throttle, turn on our flight director. This should be 20 over V2, which was 144, so we'll go 164. Not going to worry about heading because we're flying direct, although I probably could put it on 8 just to be copacetic. And our altitude, since there are no restrictions, I'll just put it right up to 20. We'll leave this for now. And then moving across this panel, we'll just drop our auto brake down to rejected takeoff. We will start our clock eventually, and our baro is 3008. And we can change that here. And now we can move down. I'm going to turn on some lights. It is starting to get darker here. There we go. I use a trackpad, not a mouse, and sometimes it's a little tricky. It wants to zoom in as well. And drop to our panel down here. You can turn on ATIS, and we go ahead and turn on our transponder to altitude on. And we can flip it to TA when we begin to taxi. And our panel lights. So our APU is on, so we can turn on those generators, turn off ground power, turn on the APU bleed. You can hear the rush of air. So now we can call for our pushback. So I pulled up a cool little map called Airport VS. It's a free plugin and it shows me runways, taxiways. So we're going to be taxiing via, I think that looks like Mike, to Delta down to 08 right. So I use a really cool little program called Better Pushback, and we'll just line up our airplane where we want it to go. And once it's green, we know we're good.
Alright, Captain, got the directions. Let me know through the menu when you're ready.
So we're ready, because it takes them a while to get here. So let's go ahead and start our pushback.
Great news, Captain, your tow's coming.
This guy's very happy. He loves his job. So there's our tow. And while we're waiting, let's see if there's anything we need to do. We'll put on our anti-collision because we're going to be firing things up here.
Alright, looks like the doors and hatches are closed and we're ready to connect.
Like I said, it takes a while for this guy to complete everything he needs to do.
Welcome aboard, Captain. Tow's connected, bypass pins inserted. Go ahead and kill the parking brake when you're ready to go.
Alright, parking brake should be off.
Here comes the pushback. Light 'em up.
So we can fire up our engines. So packs have to come off. Whoops, wrong way. And engine number 1 or 2. Sorry. And we're watching this N2 here. When it gets to 25, we can go ahead and add idle fuel. We're watching oil pressure as well. So and that will flip off in a second. And we'll go ahead and fire up engine number 1. N2 is coming up. Waiting for oil pressure. There we go. One thing I forgot to do is turn off ground power, but it might have done that automatically when I turned on the APU generators.
Just about done here. Go ahead and set your parking brake.
All right.
And we're disconnecting the tow. Give me just a moment.
Normally what they do is step to the right side of the airplane and show the pen. We'll disconnect. There he goes. And we can go ahead and put on our generators. Turn off our APU.
And we're disconnected. Signal and pin on the right. Take it easy and have a safe flight.
And packs to auto. And APU off. Whoops. And we'll see that drop. There he is, holding up the pen. I love it. So immersive. So let's put in a couple of notches of flaps. Down to 5. You can see that right here. So we are ready to taxi. All right, let's kill that parking brake. And look for M. So our windsock is showing winds out of the east, so I think we're going to be okay. Wanted to start our probes here. Well, I'm glad the nose wheel is working. Well, we've got a ways to taxi, so I think I'll save you from a lot of driving around on the airport grounds. So join me in a second. We are at the end of runway 08 right. And we have been cleared for takeoff, so let's flip on our lights. We don't need runway turn off right now. Let's turn on our strobe. We won't need the logo light eventually. Hopefully nobody can get close enough to read that. And we can just go ahead and start our clock. So we have flaps. Passenger view. Now Steve Haynes, my friend, he arms LNAV and VNAV before takeoff, but I haven't done that myself. Let's get get centered on the runway here, Brad. Pretty basic stuff. And let's just run a check and make sure everything is okay. This needs to go to continuous spark. And we can flip that off. This should be on generator. And we're ready for takeoff. Now I have a switch mapped to Toga on my joystick. Sorry about that.
D1, rotate.
Nice gentle rotate, gear up. So at 400, I'm going to go ahead and engage my LNAV and VNAV. Don't want the nose to come down. I was trying to build up speed. So
1000.
first notch of flaps up. Second notch. Put gear in the off position. Auto brake to off. And taxi light off. So the airplane is cleaned up. And we are flying towards our route here. Oops, I have one more notch. Passenger view. So AP has been engaged, LNAV, VNAV, N1. Everything seems to be firing. 4 minutes since we began our roll, and we now turn towards our heading. See our top of climb here. There's our little altitude arc. I'm sure that has an official name. I don't know what it is. And looking at our route, AZO is next. Whoops, I just noticed something. I didn't flip this all the way over. Now my friend Steve will have a heyday with that, but so getting into the soup here. Not too bad. By the way, clouds are courtesy SkyMax 4. And we're at 10,000, so we can begin turning off our lights. Whoops. I thought we were at 10,000. SkyMax does a really great job. If your computer can handle the frame rate hit, it's a lovely addition. So we're headed on up to 20,000. Back in a second. So our co-pilot called out 18,000. And I need to keep going, don't I? I blew that. So how do we get there? Well, we click altitude intervention, and you can see it powers back up again. So that was my bad when I set that originally. So we're going to continue on up, and I've set standard baro. So when in a jam, just reset your altitude, hit altitude intervention, same thing with speed. Alright. There we go. And I suppose there'll be time for a drink or two. These can go to auto now. Suppose I can turn out the logo light. Yes, Steve, I'm turning it off. And you can see we're coming up on our VOR. Next is Bagel. So we're above the deck.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have Passenger Escobar. Passenger Escobar. This is in regards to a special meal. Would you please identify yourself to a flight attendant? Passenger Escobar, please.
Some very realistic chatter there. It's a sound pack that comes with this. I'll tell you what it is in a minute. You can see Lake Michigan off in the distance. Let's see, what is that called? Sound pack, Audio Bird, XP, very nice. Okay, well, let's take a break until we get to Bagel. Traffic off here in the distance. That turn should be coming any second. Wish you could zoom in on this view, but you can't. And there's our turn. So that's Bagel. Our transition to Pang. Now our top of descent is right after Awesome, just before IROC. Probably should take a look at our approach plate for 13C. We want to be at 2,600 feet and note 109.9 for our localizer frequency. What did I say, 2,600? And it is set to 109.9, but I want it to be set on both sides. Let's get the exact bearing in 138. So I want that dialed in here. Both sides. Apparently that's one of the secrets to getting the auto land to, or even the ILS and localizer to capture properly. This should be on as well. By the way, you're hearing all kinds of noises. I don't know what those are, but stuff rattling around in the cargo bay. Alright, why don't we get back together at top of descent. So we are nearing top of descent. Just 11 miles out. But we have done our planning, haven't we? So altitude set to 26. Got our courses set. We don't need heading right now, if at all. And because this is a Boeing, it should begin our descent automatically.
Chicago Midway until information Romeo. 0 Zulu weather. Wind calm. Visibility more than 10, rain. Sky conditions 4,900 scattered, 6,900 broken, 10,000 broken. Temperature 23, dew point 14. Altimeter 3006.
3006.
31 center, 31 right, 31 left. Departing runways 22 left, 22 right. Advise on initial contact. You have Romeo.
Well, I'm not sure where they get the runways, but anyway, I got to remember 36. Let's take a look at what our weather
Chicago
is.
Midway until information
108, so
0
or 180. So I'm
weather.
not sure what's going
Wind
on.
calm. Visibility more than 10.
I think we're
rain.
going to just stick with
Sky
it.
conditions 4,900 scattered, 6,900 broken, 10,000.
So you'll notice that power has come back and we're descending. I didn't touch a thing. Now in the Airbuses you have to begin your descent manually by clicking the center of the altitude knob, but this does it for you. So we're going to stick with 130. I'm not sure why they would be using 3.1. So, do we trust ATIS or not? Well, I suppose ATC would actually be telling us what to do, but since we don't have that, I'm just going to go with 130. And we're coming up on 18,000, so let's zero 06. We've got some clouds moving in. Wow, that's amazing. Indiana is a very flat state. It has its beauty, but it's very flat. Alright, back in a minute. We are coming up on 10,000 feet, coming through clouds. See 90 below us. Goes into Chicago. I'll be very interested to see how well we handle the turn to final. It's kind of a severe angle. You can see this here. It'd be nice probably to be vectored out this direction and have a little more gentle angle. I could see if we could, so here's let's see, Cutler, and then it takes us straight north. We could come out to, let's see, maybe Jean for a little better angle. What was that? Jean? Or maybe, so here's, it's hard to read these, but if we came out here to maybe Pepke, so let's try that. I forgot that already. KE. See if I get this in the right place. Yep. So now when we look at this, it takes us out a little bit. So it's not quite as severe. So in essence, I just vectored myself. I'm not sure what that does to our descent here. I don't know if it's going to make an adjustment or not. Well, it is giving us an altitude for it, so maybe it factored it in. Whoops. We're below 10,000. I got too excited about that extra waypoint. This is Interstate 80. Headed out to Iowa. This is 294 for those of you who are familiar. With the Chicago area. Here's our airport off in the distance. So this will help us a little bit. We can get back on track here. So back in a second. All right, we are just passing Bepke and headed towards our intercept, localizer intercept at Hebku. Try to get the airplane slowed down a little bit more. And drop a notch of flaps now.
Thousand to go.
And I'm going to be looking for our diamonds here for our approach. Picking up some speed here, don't like that. How about some spoilers? Don't want to mix
2500.
a lot of spoiler with flaps, but
2500.
alright, I just saw our localizer bug. And as soon as I see it light up, I'm going to click the approach button. But right now I'm trying to get things slowed down. O'Hare off in the distance. Turn on our wipers here. Getting a little rain. Alright, speed is coming down nicely. Alright, there is our localizer diamond. It lit up for a second. And while we're turning, I'm gonna turn on our auto brake. Drop our speed 160. Alright. We tracked our speed brakes or spoilers, I forget. Speed brake. My friend Steve was telling me the difference between Airbus and Boeing. Alright, approach is on. Speed at 160. Another notch of flaps. You can see our glide slope slipping down. Runway straight ahead. Gear down, notch of flaps, second autopilot. And take this down to 144. So, looking at our ILS approach, localizer and glide slope are right on. And now that the gear is down, I can turn on our taxi lights, runway turn-off lights, logo light is on. Final notch of flaps. Going to be flying over the Cal-Sag channel. lot of surface hanging out there. Chicago in the distance. The latest version of X-Plane, this is 11.25, has done a lot more with the city of Chicago, but you got to get closer to see it. All right, land 3.
1,000 feet, stabilize, Mr. Burchett, as you said.
When you weren't looking, I did change this altimeter on the descent. Alright, so we should get an auto land. The secret to that is having both of those autopilot buttons selected and active. And here we come.
Thousand feet, stabilize, Mr. Burchett, as you said.
And we have reverse. And reverse off. And we can taxi to our runway. I'm sorry, to our terminal. And we'll start cleaning up the airplane. Air traffic control wants us to stop before we cross a live taxiway.
1,000 feet, stabilize, Mr. Burchett, as you said.
Still got our spoilers up. I'll zoom in so you can see that. And continue with our flaps.
Flying has been switched on. For your safety, please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the seatbelt sign has been switched.
Very cool. I love it. See our leading edge retracting. Well, I think I'm going to call it quits here. But you've seen another example of the ZIBO in flight, and I'm getting a little bit better at it, getting a little bit more detailed about my prep. But please post your comments and questions. And until next time, this is Bread Wild.